Now I'd like to welcome Wayne Balta from IBM to the stage. Wayne is the Chief Environmental Executive at IBM Corporation. His global responsibilities include environmental affairs, energy efficiency, toxicology. Wayne is also a member of IBM's Growth and Transformation Team, which is a group of senior IBM executives that drives growth pursuant to innovation and shifts business and technology. Wayne, I think Wayne spoke at our very first climate leadership conference. I think it was the first one, maybe? First or second. It's been a while. But we are very excited to have him back here to talk about how IBM is integrating climate into your entire business operation. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet, very much. I appreciate that introduction. On behalf of IBM, it is an honor to speak with you this morning. To our colleagues from L'Oreal, wow, I mean, what a compelling commitment and set of results from one of the world's truly iconic brands. I'd like to congratulate the Climate Registry and the Center for Energy and Climate Solutions for continuing this annual conference in 2018. We at IBM are very pleased that you have done so. We missed seeing the EPA as a conference host, but we admire the Bloomberg philanthropies for becoming one. I'd like to talk about what IBM has done regarding climate change, and doing that to reflect upon why it has been natural for IBM to do so. Now, I'll do this in a chronological manner, focusing on our operational involvement, and I'm going to close with some comments about IBM people. Regrettably, I don't have the time this morning to also discuss how today's breakthrough information technologies involving data, analytics, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, personified by Watson, how those things enable encouraging new solutions for society at large. That would be a separate talk all its own. Maybe one day I would love to do it. Now, with that said, let me get started. IBM's been in business since 1911. During its 107-year history, IBM has reinvented itself numerous times, from a company that originally made things like cheese slicers and scales, to a vertically integrated computer manufacturer, to a services-led global enterprise, and upon IBM's most recently completed transformation, to becoming the world's leading cognitive solutions and cloud platform company for enterprises. What has not changed across our history is IBM's commitment to corporate responsibility. More than 50 years ago, IBM's then CEO, Thomas J. Watson Jr., son of the founder, said this. He said, "We accept our responsibilities as a corporate citizen in community, national, and world affairs. We serve our interests best when we serve the public interest. We want to be at the forefront of those companies which are working to make our world a better place." Well, responsibility regarding climate change is part of corporate responsibility. And I'm proud to say that IBM was an early and unambiguous leader regarding climate change. To put IBM's long-standing leadership into some perspective, I'd like to share a few milestones along our journey. In 1992, IBM became a charter member of a brand new US EPA program, and it was named Energy Star. IBM stepped up at the very beginning of Energy Star, when Energy Star only involved one type of product, the personal computer and its monitor. In 1992, it was IBM and 7 other computer manufacturers who worked with the EPA to support the launch of Energy Star. In addition to IBM, it was Apple, Compaq, DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, Hewlett-Packard, NCR, Smith Corona, and Boole Information Systems. Well, what a difference 26 years makes. Today, there are over 75 types of Energy Star products, including the appliances in your kitchens, and over 2,000 manufacturers and over 2,600 retailers producing and selling them. So how participation in something like Energy Star has grown since those 8 original computer manufacturers. And as you realize, Energy Star today involves not only products, but also entire commercial buildings, industrial plants, and new homes. IBM continues to be involved in Energy Star in 2018, driving energy efficiency of computer servers and storage equipment, just as we were at the very beginning 26 years ago. Energy Star is one of many voluntary partnerships IBM has enjoyed with the US EPA. Then in 1995, a short time after IBM had embraced Energy Star, IBM became one of 3 manufacturers to voluntarily report its greenhouse gas emissions under the US Department of Energy's voluntary reporting of greenhouse gases, pursuant to something called Section 1605B of the Energy Policy Act of 1992. Now, while at the time it was primarily electric utilities that were reporting greenhouse gas emissions under this program, the fact that IBM could report its greenhouse gas emissions in 1995 indicates just how long IBM has been paying attention to that. Later in the 1990s, when IBM's business still included the manufacture of microprocessors, IBM was instrumental in guiding a collaboration between the semiconductor industry and the EPA, from which the industry agreed to voluntarily disclose and reduce its emissions of perfluorocompounds. 20 years ago, IBM became the first semiconductor manufacturer in the world to publicly declare a numerical PFC emissions reduction goal, doing so in 1998. Now, in addition to partnerships with government agencies like the EPA, IBM has also recognized the power of partnerships between business and NGOs. The World Wildlife Fund, for example, launched its Climate Savers program in the year 2000. Did you know it was IBM and Johnson & Johnson who co-created that program with the World Wildlife Fund 18 years ago? Also in the year 2000, IBM became a charter member of the World Resources Institute's Green Power Market Development Group, recognizing the importance of developing markets for the availability of renewable energy at a large scale. This was one of the earliest such collaborations with that specific focus. In fact, IBM was an early corporate purchaser of renewable energy for use in our operations. And we made that first purchase in 2001. It was a very modest start. It represented 0.2% of the total energy IBM purchased at that time. As of end 2016, 21.5% of the energy IBM purchases for use in our operations came from renewable sources. That does not count what comes to IBM via routine grid power. Our goal was 20% by 2020, meaning we achieved that goal 4 years early. When we also count what energy IBM gets via the grid, over 40% of the energy IBM consumes globally today comes from renewable sources across 18 different countries. That's about 800,000 megawatt hours of renewable energy. We procure our renewable energy and associated RECs in the same grid markets where we operate our facilities. We do not employ unbundled RECs, and accordingly, we do not rely upon unbundled RECs to imply that IBM is X% renewable. Although we certainly strive to procure more renewable energy for use in IBM's operations, we're proud of our progress considering the vast size, the historic building infrastructure, and the widespread presence of IBM across the globe. Now, going back to my sequential story, it was in 2007 that IBM published what had already been its position on climate change. 11 years ago, we wrote unambiguously, climate change is a serious concern that warrants meaningful action on a global basis to stabilize the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases. IBM believes all sectors of society, the economy, and governments worldwide must participate in solutions to climate change. 11 years ago. Now, looking out among you, and as I did this morning, it strikes me that much of what I've described may have occurred before several in this audience had begun their professional careers, or perhaps even completed college. For others, this might be a trip down memory lane. Perhaps I've reminded you of some of your prior projects. But in either case, I want to emphasize that it's essential to inculcate a long-term, steadfast commitment in the environmental work that you do. It is essential to sustain sustainability, regardless of whether the topic is popular or not at a given point in time, and regardless of the short-term ups and downs of business cycles. So with that said, I hope you can now all better understand one particular company's long-standing commitment to addressing climate change. It's also reflected in our CO2 emissions reduction goals, and more importantly, our results. From 2000 to 2016, IBM set and achieved 3 successive CO2 emissions reduction goals. We set our first goal in the year 2000, followed by others in 2007 and 2015. In fact, IBM just achieved its latest CO2 emissions reduction goal 4 years earlier. That goal has been to reduce CO2 emissions 35% by 2020 against the base year of 2005. We reached 38.1% at year-end 2016. All of this and much more is articulated in IBM's 27th annual Voluntary Corporate Environmental Report. And I'd like to actually say a few words about Voluntary Corporate Environmental Reporting. IBM published its first one in 1990, 27 years ago. Subsequently, in 1993, following some substantive discussions with leading NGOs, IBM and 9 other companies launched the Public Environmental Reporting Initiative. That group issued a specific set of guidelines in 1994 for corporate environmental reports, which at that time were relatively nascent. Those 9 other companies were Amoco, British Petroleum, Dow, DuPont, Northern Telecom, Phillips Petroleum, Polaroid, Rockwell, and United Technologies. Much in the arena of voluntary corporate environmental reporting followed, with the Global Reporting Initiative, for example, coming along in 1997. Corporate environmental reporting is another domain where IBM has played a lead role. In fact, I believe the tenure and the uninterrupted publication of IBM's annual corporate environmental report may be unsurpassed across industry. The years go by, and IBM has transformed its business from having once been rather vertically integrated manufacturer to being increasingly reliant upon suppliers. In 2010, IBM updated its requirements for suppliers, requiring them to, among other things, set goals to conserve energy and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. These requirements reflect IBM's belief in 3 things. 1, addressing climate change requires action by all individual companies, not just some in an umbrella fashion. Number 2, companies everywhere must build their own capacity to do this, to sustain it. Otherwise, it's at risk of becoming a fad versus being sustained. And number 3, accountability and action are best driven by deterministic data, real facts. As the middle of this decade arrived, IBM was invited during 2015 by the White House staff to become one of the first 81 companies to support the American Business Act on Climate Pledge. This pledge involved not only actions that companies would take regarding their operations, but it also demonstrated the company's support for the conclusion of a UN climate change agreement in Paris that would take a strong step forward toward a low-carbon, sustainable future. IBM was pleased to support the American Business Act on Climate Pledge. Finally, and as I wind up my story about decades of work, IBM expressed its support during 2017 for the U.S. to remain a party to the UN's Paris Climate Agreement, as did many other companies. In the meantime, and regardless of government action on climate change, IBM continues doing what we always do. We dependably sustain our commitment. IBMers across the world continue innovating, inventing, collaborating, and finding ways to further reduce energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. And we're always thinking about what comes next. You know, one of the greatest blessings of the job that I'm privileged to hold is that our employees, IBMers, they're so very engaged in this. I haven't needed to coerce my colleagues to get on board, and I haven't needed to impose any internal penalties to get them to act. So that's some of what IBM has done regarding climate change for the last quarter century. We're proud to have taken meaningful action and achieved some demonstrable results for a sustained period of time. But why? Why does an organization come to initiate and sustain work like this? Okay, I certainly don't know the answer for everyone, but I do know what makes a difference at IBM: a culture of corporate responsibility. Lou Gerstner became IBM's chairman and chief executive in the early 1990s, and he was the first and only IBM CEO to come from outside of the company. In his 2002 book about IBM's historic turnaround, he said the following. He said, "I have spent more than 25 years as a senior executive of 3 different corporations. Until I came to IBM, I probably would have told you that culture was just one among several important elements in any organization's makeup and success. But I came to see in my time at IBM that culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game." He went on to say, "In the end, an organization is nothing more than the collective capacity of its people to create value." Now, having personally been with IBM myself for over 33 years, I can assure you that environmental responsibility is part and parcel of corporate responsibility. And corporate responsibility is embedded within IBM's DNA. The quote I just read from Lou Gerstner referenced people as the substance of an organization. So, I'd like to close my remarks this morning saying something about people. It is the diverse people across more than 170 different countries where IBM does business who perform the work that generates the results, which end up being ascribed to the entity we call IBM. The work I've discussed wasn't just done by people of just one country or from just one constituency. Not one race, not one religion, not one national origin, not one gender. At IBM, diversity and inclusion are part of corporate responsibility as well, and they remain one of IBM's core strengths. So, in the same spirit of having shared some things with you that you may not have known about IBM and climate change, I'd like to close my remarks with a short video about diversity and inclusion at IBM. Because without a lot of really different people working together, I wouldn't have had these things to talk about. Perhaps the video might also include some things you did not know about IBM. So may I now ask that we play the video, please?
We are standing together, shoulder to shoulder, all working for one common good. And the good of each of us as individuals affects the greater good of the country.
These words from our founder, Thomas J. Watson Sr., reflect IBM's past and our corporate character today. In 1899, we hired Richard McGregor, an African American, 65 years before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In 1914, we hired our first disabled employee, 76 years before the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. In the 1930s, IBM continued its progressive workplace programs and policies with the arrival of professional women and equal pay for equal work, and promoted its first female vice president, Ruth Leach Amonette, in 1943. Women's careers at IBM have been on the rise ever since. In 1953, Thomas J. Watson Jr. established a policy of hiring people without regard to race, color, or creed, making IBM the first U.S. corporation to issue such a mandate. In the years that followed, this non-discrimination policy was expanded to include religion, sex, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, national origin, genetics, disability, and age. And in 2005, IBM became the first major corporation in the world to include genetics privacy in its non-discrimination policy. We push forward every day, advocating for our employees to provide stability, reassurance, and support. Just as we publicly advocated against the bathroom bills in the United States, so too have we set internal policies to extend same-sex partner benefits in 50 countries. For more than 100 years, from our founders to Ginny Rometty today, we believe that no one should face discrimination for being who they are.
We are privileged to work for a company that's had the opportunity to have an impact on history in so many ways.
IBMers speak with a diverse voice, representing more than 170 countries. Encouraging all of us to think.
Okay, that wraps up what I'd like to share with you this morning. Thank you for paying attention. I appreciate it, and I admire everybody for making the trip here to Colorado, and once again, admire the Climate Registry and the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions and the Bloomberg Philanthropies for making this conference possible uninterrupted in 2018. Great job. Questions? I have time for it.
We have a few minutes here. We can take a few, and then we'll have to break for our take time for our break. But
I know you've been sitting for 2 hours.
I know, and we are between us and the break. I'm just saying. There's a question over here. Kind of hard to see with the lights. It's good if you move around. Rick?
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Congratulations. It's a really impressive video, by the way. And I was not aware of all those facts, so it's really good that you share that. I wanted to ask you something. What are you most excited about with IBM in terms of where the future is going and the confluence of all the technological innovations that are happening across systems and what it can mean for solving some of the challenges with climate change?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. My own personal view is that to really solve the challenge of climate change, we really need massive solutions deployed at large scales, including everybody. And for that to happen, we need invention and we need technology in addition to policy and leadership. I referenced early on in my remarks how today, unlike any other, when you work in the tech industry, you constantly see shifts in technology. Today, with data, analytics, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, okay, all those technologies feed off of data. They demand data to do anything useful. What we see today is how certain parts of the economy are scooping solutions up that are based on data analytics, AI, and blockchain. And the ones who are buying that now and deploying it aggressively to their great benefit are those sectors of the economy, frankly, that can usually afford to do that first. What I worry a little bit about is that the environment gets left behind. And I think our challenge is to make sure that the environment globally, as a fictitious buyer or user, has to also see the benefits of these things to help get large-scale solutions delivered so that the energy we consume comes through us, delivered to us on the grid, kind of automatically. So that would be the way I'd respond to that. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, Jane.
Wayne, you guys have been working at the intersection of IT and cities
Yes.
for many years.
Yes.
How does that, and does that play into climate change at all?
It sure does. I mean, some of you may remember Smarter Cities, something IBM launched. I think I remember exactly when we did. It was in September 2008, and there's a reason I remember why. It's because we did it just after the financial collapse happened, and I remember those discussions. Smarter Planet inherently involved operating the world's infrastructure. Shout out to UC Boulder, operating the world's infrastructure in a much more efficient and intelligent manner. You know, energy efficiency isn't the coolest, sexiest thing to talk about in a climate change conference, but boy, does it deliver over and over and over. And so yes, anytime we make the world's infrastructure more efficient, we are helping climate change. And that's why I brought up Energy Star for a reason. I mean, some of you may wonder, why the heck is this guy talking about Energy Star? This is about a climate change. Energy Star is all about using energy more efficiently. It's part of this, and it matters. And there's that connection.
It absolutely does matter.
Yeah. You need that break, don't you? I see one more.
Is there another one? Oh, great. Oh, there's Kevin. Right in front of you.
So I'm going to cross.
To introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, Kevin Leahy with Duke Energy. So first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I want to cross boundaries a little bit from where you operate and work and focus, and generalize more broadly to information in general, if I could. And given the fact that we are in a world right now where disinformation or chaos or confusion seems to be causing some mischief, do you have any thoughts about how either your company or the industry more broadly can be more proactive or helpful in helping resolve that?
Yeah, so, you know, we're in a world awash in data, for example. And as I think you all realize, you know, data isn't just a nice, neat little number in a relational database, you know, row X, column Y. Data is a tweet, it's a photograph, it's a video, you know, it's all these things, unstructured data. And there are a lot of technologies, as I referenced, that are making use of data. IBM has published, I think 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, a set of principles on the responsible use of data. It's accessible easily on IBM.com, you know, responsibility with data, responsibility with artificial intelligence. For example, we would say that you shouldn't have AI algorithms out in the marketplace that don't explain what they do and how they do it. So we're very much interested in accuracy, facts, and the like. And I think we just, you know, have to remind ourselves every day. And I think this is particularly important for people in the audience at an earlier stage of their career, you know, not 33 years into it like me, particularly with social media. Always look at your sources for the information. And, you know, understand that, you know, journalism today, anybody's a journalist. And everybody writes blogs. Just be smart as a consumer of information. Okay? Thank you.
You know, Wayne, you talked about reporting, and you said, talked about all the different places that you've been doing reporting for a long time. And I just have to put in a plug there that, you know, reporting is not very sexy either. Energy efficiency might have a little more cachet, in fact, than reporting. I happen to know that, you know, there are people in this audience that they spend a lot of time in any year reporting into multiple places. Multiple places. Transparency is important, and looking at the numbers is important. Could you talk a little bit about why you think putting those numbers out there is something you found kind of fundamental to IBM?
Transparency is hugely important. In fact, you know, David and I have known each other a little while. You might like this. I've always felt that one of the most effective U.S. federal laws ever was the 1986 amendments, the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act, because it was that brought along something at the time that was called the Toxics Release Inventory. And if you ever wanted to see a federal law that caused action quickly, holy cow, was it that one? And all it did was require companies to publicly disclose their legally permitted emissions. That moved a lot of action really quickly, including in my company. So transparency has always been a hugely important thing. I have always liked corporate environmental reporting for my responsibility internally at IBM because of what it compels. So you could be the greatest writer in the world. You could have gotten a degree in English literature, or you could write from the greatest college. But if you don't have content, it's kind of hard to write. So the fact that your organization is going to compile an environmental report and put it out publicly for public scrutiny of the data, well, you've got to generate content. And in order to generate content, you have to have a management system inside your organization that compels people to collect that content and to examine it and to verify it for accuracy. So the whole process of producing a corporate environmental report has all these management benefits to a person with the job like I have. And I am a huge fan of transparency, and generally the more the better.
You know, it's that old saying, right? You can't manage what you're not measuring.
Right.
And we see, I think, this focus on disclosure only getting more pronounced in the next few years. In fact, I'll invite you to our breakout session after the break to talk about the emerging trends in climate-related financial
And let me
disclosure.
point out to my business colleagues in the audience, there will always be some things we don't want to disclose that are business confidential. Okay, and I understand that, and I've got several I don't want to do, on behalf of IBM. But there is a heck of a lot that you can. So I don't want to come across as saying, put it all out there because, well, we're in a market economy, and business is business, fair is fair, and, confidential information is that. Okay, but in terms of impact upon the environment, there's plenty we share, and it's typically helpful.
I think it's helpful.
Okay,
Congratulations.
thanks. Okay.